The most powerful discovery in human history is not electricity, nor the splitting of the atom, nor even our ventures into the vast unknown of space. It is something far more intimate, yet infinitely more consequential, the realization that our thoughts, those quiet, unseen energies that flow through our consciousness, directly shape the quality and direction of our lives. This is not speculation. This is not philosophy in the realm of theory. This is demonstrable truth, proved through the centuries by every man and woman who has ever risen from ordinary circumstances to extraordinary achievement. You see, most people live their entire lives never understanding the machinery of their own minds. They allow themselves to be carried by currents they didn't choose, influenced by voices that aren't their own, drifting toward destinations they never consciously selected. And then they wonder why life seems to happen to them, rather than for them or through them. I want you to consider something remarkable. What if the difference between the life you have and the life you want comes down to an agreement, a profound, unspoken contract between your conscious mind and the deeper spirit that animates your being? What if prosperity in all its forms, financial, relational, spiritual, physical, begins the moment these two forces align instead of oppose? The mind says, "I will think deliberately." The spirit responds, "Then I will manifest accordingly." This is the foundation that Earl Nightingale discovered decades ago when he recorded that simple yet revolutionary idea: we become what we think about. Not occasionally, not sometimes, but with the reliability of natural law, with the certainty of gravity pulling objects toward the center of the earth, with the inevitability of water finding its level. We become what we persistently, consistently think about. Look around you. Every object you see began as a thought in someone's mind. The chair you're sitting in, the device you're using, the building that shelters you all were once invisible, mere electrical impulses firing across the neurons of a human brain before they took physical form. If this is true of the world around us, why would it not be true of the world within us? If thoughts can create tangible objects, can they not also create tangible circumstances? Consider this. Your life as it exists today is the physical manifestation of your habitual thought patterns of yesterday, and your life tomorrow will be the physical manifestation of your habitual thought patterns today. This is not mysticism. This is not superstition. This is the operating system of human achievement. I invite you to look at the most successful individuals in any field, in any era. Trace their achievements back to their origins, and you will invariably find one common denominator: a mind fixated on possibility rather than limitation, on solutions rather than problems, on what can be done rather than what cannot. These individuals understood, whether intuitively or through deliberate study, that thought precedes action, action precedes results, and persistent thoughts create consistent actions. But there is a critical distinction we must make. It is not merely positive thinking that creates positive outcomes. This is where many misunderstand the principle. It is directed thinking, purposeful, intentional, and aligned with deeply held values that changes lives. A ship with a rudder but no destination still wanders aimlessly. A mind with positivity but no purpose does the same. Let me share with you what the ancients understood, what great thinkers throughout history have rediscovered, and what modern psychology is only now beginning to scientifically validate. We live in what appears to be a vast, intelligent universe that responds to the dominant frequency of our thoughts and beliefs. Call it God. Call it universal intelligence, call it the subconscious mind. The name matters less than the recognition of its function. Like a fertile field, it does not judge what seeds we plant. It simply and faithfully grows whatever we sow. Most people spend their days unconsciously planting seeds of worry, doubt, fear, and limitation. then express surprise when these very things crop up in their experience. They live reactively, allowing external circumstances to dictate their internal state. The news cycle determines their mood. Other people's opinions shape their self-worth. Economic reports decide their level of confidence. In essence, they have abdicated the throne of their own minds, allowing the kingdom to be ruled by whatever happens to be loudest or nearest in the moment. This is the great tragedy of modern life. We have more freedom, more opportunity, more knowledge, and more resources than any generation before us. Yet so many feel increasingly powerless, increasingly stressed, increasingly disconnected from meaning. Why? Because externally we advance technologically, while internally we remain ungoverned. The solution is not complicated, though it requires something increasingly rare in our distracted age: sustained attention and deliberate practice. The mind must be trained like any muscle. It must be directed like any powerful tool. It must be fed like any living entity. And this training, this direction, this nourishment is not a one-time event, but a way of life. When you wake each morning, what is the first thought you allow into your consciousness? Is it worry about the day ahead? Is it regret about the day behind? Or is it gratitude for another opportunity to create, to serve, to grow, to become? These initial thoughts are not trivial. They set the frequency for the hours that follow. They prime the pump of your mental well. They establish the lens through which you will view every circumstance, every interaction, every challenge, and every opportunity that crosses your path. But let's move beyond theory to application. How does one forge this agreement between mind and spirit that leads to prosperity? It begins with taking complete responsibility for the content of your consciousness. This is the great liberation and the great burden of human existence. No one else thinks your thoughts. No circumstance dictates your interpretation. No external force determines your meaning. These are choices, moment by moment, that belong exclusively to you. Imagine two farmers with adjacent fields. Both experience the same weather, the same seasons, the same fundamental conditions. One plants corn, tends it daily, protects it from predators, ensures it has proper nourishment. The other does nothing, allowing whatever may grow to grow. When harvest time comes, which field will yield abundance? The answer is self-evident. Yet this is precisely how many approach the cultivation of their minds: passively, reactively, without intention or attention. Most people vastly underestimate two things: how much they can achieve in a decade of focused effort, and how little they can achieve in a decade of scattered attention. The difference is not intelligence, nor opportunity, nor privilege, though. These factors certainly influence the starting point. The difference is in the agreement between mind and spirit, between thought and action, between intention and execution. Consider the life of Abraham Lincoln, born in a one-room log cabin to illiterate parents, no formal education to speak of. Yet he educated himself by candlelight, reading and rereading the few books he could obtain. His mind became his laboratory for greatness. While working manual labor, he was thinking about law. While splitting rails, he was mentally composing arguments. While facing defeat after defeat in his political career, he was cultivating the wisdom that would eventually preserve a nation. Lincoln understood intuitively what we must understand deliberately. Circumstances may determine where you start, but they do not determine where you finish. Or consider Thomas Edison. When his laboratory burned to the ground, destroying years of work and research, his response was not despair, but curiosity. "There is great value in disaster," he said. "All our mistakes are burned up. Thank God we can start anew." This is not blind optimism. This is the response of a mind trained to see opportunity where others see only catastrophe, to recognize that failures are not endings, but redirections. These are not isolated examples. They represent a pattern repeated throughout human history. Those who achieve greatly are those who think greatly not in terms of self-aggrandizement, but in terms of possibility, service, and contribution. They forge an unwritten covenant between their conscious intentions and their spiritual essence. They direct their thoughts as a captain directs a ship, with clarity of destination and consistency of course. But what about the inevitable challenges? What about the setbacks, the disappointments, the failures that are part of every human journey? This is where most people's mental discipline falters. They interpret temporary defeat as permanent failure. They allow momentary circumstances to override their long-term vision. They break the agreement between mind and spirit at the first sign of resistance. Yet this is precisely when the agreement matters most. It is easy to maintain positive, directed thinking when everything is going well. The true test comes when the storm arrives, when the path becomes unclear, when the doubt creeps in. This is when the mentally disciplined individual, the one who understands the immutable law of mind and manifestation, doubles down on their commitment to think deliberately rather than reactively. Consider this truth: the circumstance itself has no inherent meaning, none. It is neither good nor bad, neither fortunate nor unfortunate, until we assign it meaning through our interpretation. The same event can destroy one person and elevate another, depending entirely on how they choose to frame it in their minds. The loss of a job can be a devastating setback, or an opportunity for reinvention. A relationship ending can be a personal failure or a gateway to growth. A financial challenge can be proof of incompetence or a masterclass in resilience. The difference is not in the event, but in the thinking. This is the level of mental sovereignty I'm inviting you to claim. This is the depth of agreement between mind and spirit that creates not just material prosperity, though that often follows, but a prosperity of being that transcends circumstance. When your thoughts are deliberately chosen rather than reactively triggered, you experience a fundamental shift in how you move through the world. You no longer feel like life is happening to you. You recognize that life is happening through you. Let me be clear. This is not about denying reality or ignoring genuine problems. It is about approaching reality from a position of creative power rather than victimhood. It is about addressing problems from a mindset of capability rather than helplessness. The most effective problem solvers in history have always been those who could maintain clear, directed thinking even in the face of overwhelming challenges. During the darkest days of World War II, when Britain stood alone against the Nazi war machine, Winston Churchill did not indulge in thoughts of defeat or surrender, though the objective circumstances would have justified such thinking. Instead, he deliberately cultivated and expressed thoughts of defiance, resilience, and ultimate victory. "We shall fight on the beaches," he declared. "We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." This was not just rhetoric. It was the external expression of an internal conviction, a testament to the power of directed thinking in the face of overwhelming odds. What challenge are you facing today that requires this level of mental discipline? What circumstance seems to justify worry, fear, or doubt? And more importantly, what would change if you approached that same challenge with thoughts of capability, creativity, and conviction? The quality of your thinking determines the quality of your actions. The quality of your actions determines the quality of your results. The quality of your results determines the quality of your life. This chain cannot be broken. It operates with mathematical precision. Improve the input, and you inevitably improve the output. change the seed and you change the harvest. But here is where many stumble. They want the improved output without changing the input. They want different results while thinking the same thoughts, taking the same actions, maintaining the same habits. Einstein called this insanity, doing the same thing repeatedly while expecting different results. Yet how many live this definition of insanity day after day, year after year, wondering why nothing changes? The agreement between mind and spirit requires more than wishful thinking. It requires the courage to think differently when everyone around you thinks conventionally. It requires the discipline to feed your mind aspirational content when the world feeds you limitations. It requires the persistence to maintain clear, directed thinking, not just for a day or a week, but as a way of life. Consider how you would live if you truly believed, not intellectually, but with bone-deep conviction, that your thoughts today are creating your reality tomorrow. Would you allow yourself to dwell on fears, resentments, and inadequacies? Would you consume mental junk food in the form of mindless entertainment and negative news? Would you surrender the precious real estate of your consciousness to thoughts that disempower rather than empower? I suspect not. I suspect you would guard the gateway of your mind with far greater vigilance. You would select your thoughts with the same care with which you would select the materials to build your home. You would recognize that mental inputs are not neutral. They are either moving you toward prosperity or away from it. This vigilance, this careful curation of your mental environment is not paranoia. It is wisdom. It is not restriction. It is liberation. When you take full ownership of what you allow into your mind, you take the first and most crucial step toward taking full ownership of your life. But the agreement between mind and spirit goes beyond mere positive thinking. It encompasses purpose, vision, and values, the deeper currents that give direction to our thoughts. Without these anchors, even the most positive thinking becomes untethered, floating wherever the winds of circumstance might blow. Ask yourself, what is the purpose that gives meaning to my days? What is the vision that pulls me forward even when motivation wanes? What are the values that serve as my non-negotiable standards? These questions are not philosophical luxuries. They are practical necessities for anyone seeking to live with intention rather than by default. Purpose provides the why behind your efforts. Vision provides the what that you're moving toward. Values provide the how that governs your choices. Together, they form the coordinates by which you navigate the complex terrain of modern life. Without them, prosperity remains elusive because you have no clear destination against which to measure progress. Think of the greatest innovations, the most enduring companies, the most impactful movements in history. Behind each one stood a person or group of people with clarity of purpose, vision, and values. They didn't merely think positively, they thought purposefully. They aligned their mental energy with something larger than themselves, something worthy of their full commitment. Steve Jobs didn't just think about making good products. He thought about putting a dent in the universe by creating tools that would unleash human creativity. Mother Teresa didn't just think about helping people. She thought about honoring the divine in every human being through acts of compassion. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't just think about civil rights. He thought about a world where character, not color, determined one's opportunities and treatment. These individuals understood that prosperity in its fullest sense flows from alignment. When your thoughts align with your deepest values, when your actions align with your highest vision, when your daily choices align with your core purpose, you experience a level of congruence that naturally generates energy, focus, and resilience. This alignment is the agreement between mind and spirit in its most powerful expression. But make no mistake, This alignment doesn't happen automatically. It requires honest self-assessment. It requires the courage to discard limiting beliefs that no longer serve you. It requires the humility to admit where your thinking has been flawed and the willingness to adopt new mental patterns even when they feel unfamiliar. Many people resist this process because familiarity feels safe, even when that familiarity is dysfunctional. They know their current thought patterns aren't serving them, but at least these patterns are known. There's a perverse comfort in predictable pain, in familiar limitation. The prospect of thinking differently, of breaking lifelong mental habits, triggers a natural resistance, a fear of the unknown. This is where courage enters the equation. Not physical courage, but the more subtle courage to think against the grain of your conditioning, to challenge your own assumptions, to question the mental software installed by parents, teachers, peers, and society. This courage is essential because without it, even the most inspired thoughts wither in the face of doubt and social pressure. The world is filled with people who had a momentary insight into a better way of thinking, a better way of living, but lacked the courage to hold that insight in the face of resistance. They glimpsed the possibility of a different life, but retreated to the safety of the familiar when the initial inspiration faded. They broke the agreement between mind and spirit at the first sign of difficulty. But not you, not anymore. Because once you understand the immutable connection between thought and manifestation, between mental pattern and physical reality, you cannot unknow it. You may temporarily forget it, you may occasionally violate it, but the truth remains, waiting patiently for your return. This truth has been expressed in different ways throughout history. As a man thinketh, so is he. Energy flows where attention goes. Your outer world reflects your inner world. These are not platitudes. They are descriptions of how the human system operates. They are as reliable as any law of physics, as consistent as any principle of mathematics. The question is not whether this principle works. The question is whether you will work it, whether you will take the reins of your mental life with the same seriousness with which you approach your physical health, your financial well-being, your professional development. Whether you will recognize that the most important real estate you'll ever own is not measured in acres, but in the space between your ears. Imagine approaching each day with this level of mental intention. You wake, not to the random thoughts triggered by your alarm, but to deliberately chosen reflections on opportunity and possibility. You move through your morning routine not on autopilot, but with conscious awareness of the gift of another day to create, to serve, to grow. You engage with challenges not as burdens to be endured, but as opportunities to express your highest capacities. This is not fantasy. This is available to you right now. The only requirement is the willingness to take complete responsibility for the content of your consciousness and the discipline to direct your thoughts consistently toward what you wish to create, rather than what you wish to avoid. The most successful individuals in any field have mastered this mental discipline. They understand that worry is a misuse of imagination, that doubt is an expense they cannot afford, that fear is often false evidence appearing real. They direct their mental energy with the same precision that a laser cutter directs its beam, with clarity, with purpose, with unwavering focus. Consider an Olympic athlete preparing for competition. They don't just train their bodies, they train their minds with equal rigor. They visualize successful performances. They mentally rehearse overcoming obstacles. They cultivate thoughts of capability and confidence even before physical evidence justifies such thinking. They understand intuitively what we must understand explicitly. The mind leads, the body follows, reality conforms. Or consider the entrepreneur launching a venture that others deem impossible. while observers see only the obstacles, the risks, the statistical likelihood of failure. The entrepreneur holds in mind a different reality, one where their solution exists, thrives, and transforms its market. They think beyond current conditions to what could be, should be, will be, through their consistent effort guided by clear vision. This is not self-deception. It is self-direction. It is the conscious choice to focus on possibility over limitation, on solutions over problems, on what can be done rather than what cannot. And this choice made consistently over time changes everything. But the agreement between mind and spirit requires more than occasional inspiration. It requires installation, the deliberate practice of new thought patterns until they become automatic, until they become your default operating system rather than a temporary upgrade. How is this installation accomplished? Through deliberate repetition, through consistent exposure to ideas that elevate rather than diminish your sense of possibility, through the careful selection of what you read, what you watch, what you discuss, who you associate with, through regular periods of reflection, visualization, and affirmation that program your subconscious with the coordinates of your intended destination. Think of the mind as a garden and thoughts as seeds. Some seeds produce nourishing fruits, vibrant flowers, sturdy trees. Others produce weeds that choke out what's beneficial. The agreement between mind and spirit begins with becoming a conscious gardener, selecting which seeds to plant, which to nurture, which to remove. Each morning presents a fresh opportunity to plant intentional seeds. Each challenge offers a chance to practice mental composure rather than reactivity. Each interaction provides a moment to choose thoughts of abundance rather than scarcity, cooperation rather than competition, possibility rather than limitation. Over time, these choices, these deliberate thoughts, create neural pathways in the brain that make constructive thinking increasingly natural. What once required conscious effort eventually becomes your default state. This is when the agreement between mind and spirit becomes not just a practice, but a way of being. It's important to recognize that this process is not about achieving perfection in your thinking. The human mind will always experience doubts, fears, and negative projections. The goal is not to eliminate these entirely, but to become increasingly aware of them, to catch them earlier, to redirect them more skillfully. The goal is mental management, not mental perfection. Even the most disciplined thinkers experience moments of doubt, periods of discouragement, episodes of fear. The difference is that they recognize these as temporary visitors, not permanent. Residents of their mental home. They acknowledge the negative thought, examine it briefly for any useful information it might contain, then consciously replace it with a thought more aligned with their purpose, vision, and values. This is the practice. This is the discipline. This is the agreement renewed day after day, moment after moment, choice after choice. And through this renewal comes a prosperity that transcends mere financial gain, though that often follows as a natural consequence. True prosperity encompasses abundance in all dimensions of life: vibrant health, meaningful relationships, engaging work, spiritual fulfillment, and yes, material comfort. It emerges not from frantic striving, but from aligned thinking, from the congruence between what you most deeply value and what you most consistently think about. When mind and spirit agree, energy flows without resistance. Opportunities appear that remained invisible before. Solutions emerge for problems that seemed insurmountable, not through magic, but through a shift in perception that allows you to recognize what was always there, but filtered out by limited thinking. The universe responds not to what we want, but to what we are, to the sum total of our habitual thoughts, beliefs, and expectations. Change these, and you change the response. Elevate these, and you elevate the results. This is not philosophy. This is practical psychology, validated by both ancient wisdom and modern science. Neuroscience now confirms what great thinkers have always known. The brain physically changes in response to persistent thought patterns. Neural pathways strengthen or weaken based on what we regularly focus on. The mind is not fixed, but fluid, not static, but dynamic, constantly reshaping itself in response to our mental habits. This neuroplasticity, this ability of the brain to reorganize itself, is perhaps the most empowering scientific discovery of our time. It confirms that no thought pattern is permanent unless we make it so through repetition. It validates the possibility of transformation at the most fundamental level of our being. It scientifically affirms what spiritual teachers have taught for millennia. We can change our lives by changing our minds. What would change for you if you fully embraced this truth? If you approached each day as an opportunity to strengthen neural pathways that support your highest aspirations rather than your deepest fears? If you recognized each thought not as a passive response to circumstance, but as an active creator of circumstance? The agreement between mind and spirit begins with this recognition and expands through consistent practice. It grows through studied application of principles that never fail, laws that never waver, truths that never expire. And as this agreement strengthens, prosperity follows not as a reward for good behavior, but as the natural result of aligned energy. Think of water flowing through a hose. When the hose is straight, water flows freely. When the hose is kinked, flow is restricted. Your thoughts are either straightening the hose or kinking it. They are either allowing prosperity to flow or restricting its natural movement. This is not metaphysical speculation. This is practical reality observed through centuries of human experience. Those who think in alignment with universal principles, principle of growth, of service, of contribution, of integrity, experience a flow of life that others find elusive. Not because they are special or chosen, but because they have aligned themselves consciously or unconsciously with how life actually works, rather than how they fear it might work or wish it would work. The invitation before you now is to make this alignment conscious, to forge this agreement between mind and spirit with full awareness, to claim the birthright of directed thinking that is available to every human being, but claimed by so few. This claiming begins not with grand gestures, but with small choices. Not with dramatic declarations, but with quiet decisions about where to direct your attention in any given moment. It begins with the humility to admit that many of your current thought patterns may be undermining the very prosperity you seek, and with the courage to install new patterns even when they feel unfamiliar. Consider this moment as a turning point. A decisive break from unconscious mental habits and the beginning of conscious mental direction. Consider this as the formal signing of an agreement between your conscious mind and the deeper spirit that animates your being, an agreement that says, "From this day forward, I choose my thoughts based on where I want to go, not where I've been. I direct my mental energy toward what I wish to create, not what I wish to avoid. I take full responsibility for the content of my consciousness, recognizing it as the primary creative force in my life." This agreement, once made and consistently honored, changes everything, not overnight but over time, not through magical thinking, but through the natural operation of cause and effect. Thought is cause, experience is effect. Change the cause, and you change the effect with mathematical precision. The prosperity you seek, in whatever form is most meaningful to you, begins with this agreement between mind and spirit. It begins with the recognition that thoughts are not passive observers of reality, but active creators of reality. It begins with the courage to think deliberately rather than reactively, intentionally rather than habitually. This is your invitation. This is your opportunity. This is your moment to align the most powerful forces in human experience, thought and action, intention and execution, mind and spirit, toward the creation of a life that reflects your highest vision rather than your deepest fears. The choice, as always, belongs to you. Choose wisely, for as surely as day follows night, experience follows thought. As surely as summer follows spring, manifestation follows mindset. As surely as harvest follows planting, prosperity follows the agreement between mind and spirit, an agreement you can make right now, in this moment, with nothing required but the decision to direct your thoughts with the same care with which you would direct your most precious resources. For in truth, your thoughts are your most precious resource, the causal force behind everything you experience, everything you create, everything you become. Guard them, guide them, grow them with this understanding, and watch as the universe responds in kind, reflecting back to you the prosperity that has been waiting only for the alignment of your thinking with universal truth. The agreement is yours to make. The prosperity is yours to claim. The time to begin is now.